Recording is on, and now, yeah, I'll start the stream, I suppose. Oh. Okay, stream is live. Sending out a couple of messages. Literally just got a notification that another one of my friends has started streaming. That's funny. Oh. Whoops. Oh, goodness. Close that. Twitch, if I mouse over, this is kind of funny. If I mouse over the follow button, it gives me an error that I'm unable to follow this user. We will get started very shortly here. I was just making sure everybody's informed of the stream. Give everyone a couple more minutes to file in. I'll probably 7:05 Central is when we'll start, the content and whatnot. And let me know, by the way, if my audio level is okay. I've got it set to what I think should be good. I see it's occasionally coming close to peaking, but has not done so, so hopefully that's good. I think I'm actually boosting the mic input slightly in OBS, so make of that what you will. I would ordinarily ask people how their day's been. Well, at least in terms of America, I think I can speak on behalf of Americans when I say that it's been a bit of a strange day for all of us. But obviously that's other news. I do want to warn everyone that the internet here has been a little bit flaky, so it's possible that the stream drops at some point. If that happens, hang tight. I have a solution that will very quickly resolve the issue, should it arise. So, long story short, if the stream drops, expect it to be back up on the order of, I'd say 2 or 3 minutes, probably, if that should happen. I don't anticipate that it will, but it's possible. Get started in a few seconds here. And of course, let me know if the game audio is too loud as well. Alright, let's get started here. So, this is the Filtration demo. I imagine many of you will have already played this. But for anyone who hasn't, this is what the game looks like. So, Filtration, I imagine most people here are probably familiar with what it is, but just to give you a little bit of background for anyone who is uninitiated. A couple of years ago, a few years ago at this point actually, I released a very, very complicated mod for Marble Blast Gold called Quaternion. And Quaternion, I'm proud of it as a personal project goes. And at the time it was probably the most impressive project I had actually finished, in my personal opinion. The one disadvantage that Quaternion had, I feel, is that it was, in the end, a Marble Blast mod. And at the time, that was fine. That was the point of that project from the get-go. But later on, I started to think, okay, well, maybe this has more potential. Oh. The garden, they call it. Nice place to kick back and relax, look at some nice trees. Cutscenes. That are probably just a simulation. I'd be surprised if they're actual birds. Of course, we're not here to relax. We're here to pick up a module and another plum core and some ion cells while we're at it. And of course, you might have noticed there, the music got a little bit quieter for a bit. Not like in terms of actual volume, but quieter just in terms of the dynamics of the music. That's for a reason. Oh goodness, I am just now noticing that the purplish dynamic of this level, lighting-wise, is really wreaking havoc on the video compression. Hopefully that doesn't get too egregious. Where was I? Filtration is me saying, okay, I'm going to make a game similar to Quaternion. Now, obviously, I'm not just going to make a clone of Quaternion. I'm iterating on the design. I'm adding things that I think are nice to add, etc. But in Unity instead of in the Marble Blast engine. And so the result of this is that we have a standalone game. And I am planning on selling this game on Steam once it comes out, which is still quite a long time from now. So hang tight. And yeah, that's a pretty good summary of it. So your basic gameplay, it's very inspired by some of the I have to question that's not there in the actual demo, is it? Because I think I'm actually running a slightly old build of the demo now that I look at this. Yeah, that is what's called a Plonk core. It's the major collectible in the game. There's one in each level that you get. Yeah, it's not supposed to be in, like, the first room. I put it there for debug purposes, and apparently the build I'm playing right now is from a time when it was still there, so we're just going to ignore that for the time being. And here's an enemy. This is, well...
Are you kidding me? Freaking quadcopter drones are the best they could come up with for an aerial weapon, apparently. That is the cheesiest thing I've seen. I mean, I will give them credit, though. They are going to work unless you have some sort of ranged attack. They're hovering too high for you to just jump and hit them. If I were you, I'd make sure to keep moving. It looks like their targeting lasers work best when you're stationary.
Whoops!
Well, it's a good thing we backed up the software.
Oh, goodness. So yes, there's definitely, that's a change from Quaternion, is that, in Quaternion there were a couple of things that could maybe be considered, you know, so-called enemies, but only under a very generous interpretation of what constitutes an enemy. Things like the, final tower in the Quaternion level filling with deadly goo or whatever you want to call that stuff. Things like the, oh hey, now that we're up here, I can hit this button and activate this portal, and now we can freely move between the two. So yes, so, there's definitely a, more of a focus on here on collecting minor collectibles, which are these ion cells that are scattered throughout every level, like in spades. I actually can't finish that part of the level just yet. I have to come back to it later. Quaternion only had 5 of those in each level, so yeah, obviously there's more of that in scope. And there's actual combat to an extent. You still do die in one hit, but death is very much a slap on the wrist here. In a boss fight, it makes a difference because you have to restart the boss fight, obviously. But apart from that, death is pretty much just you return to any checkpoint you like. And it doesn't reset any puzzles or anything. It's literally just a teleport. And I need to be able to get this going. And that's for a reason as well. I think there's a very good argument to be made that, you know, the concept of not only a live system, because that's a topic that game designers have been bringing up for some time now, that having a fixed number of lives and a punishment for when they run out. Oh.
Jeez. I knew one of those ceilings was bound to collapse at some point.
Yeah.
This is a big room, though. Oh, and look, you see that big door up there? That looks really important. I would bet money that is where the plot core is. The only question's how to get up there.
But yeah, it has been pointed out that having a fixed number of lives and a penalty for running out of them is sort of just a holdover from the arcade days, and although it can have a purpose in some games, it's not something to have simply for the sake of having it as a design element. And I agree with that analysis. And I would take it a little bit further and say even the concept of death itself often is used as an excuse to rewind things that the player did successfully. You know, if I can do 90% of a level successfully and then fail at the last 10%, and death resets the level, well, now I have to do the 90% that I've already done again to even get a chance to do the stuff that I'm, you know, not quite good at. And that's just, you know, not very good practice. A, for trying to, you know, get the player to learn mechanics. I mean, imagine if at school it worked like that, and every time you took a test, if you didn't get a perfect score, you had to retake the exact same exam and answer all the same questions again just to get a chance to answer the ones that you got wrong the first time. I mean, that would be nuts. So yeah.
That these things cost money, right?
Oh, shut up. I expect that I will be cussing myself out a great deal as I test this game and have to listen to my own recorded voice clips from what happens when the player dies. So anyway, so I think the philosophy to follow is, and again, this doesn't obviously apply to all games. Obviously, in games like roguelikes, there's kind of an important point to it because you have procedural generation there, so there's a reason to have permadeath in those. It puts legitimate, there's stuff legitimately at stake. But in a game where dying doesn't change the content, in a game where death means...
single-handedly tank our budget or something?
In a game where death means that you just go back and do the same thing again, my theory is you should get rid of exactly what the player failed at and keep all of the rest of their progress. Oh yeah, I need to open that. Duh. And that's the philosophy that I followed in Quaternion, and that's the philosophy I intend to follow in Filtration as well. And again, there are exceptions to every rule. Boss fights. You got 2 hits in on the boss, so when you restart, should the boss spawn with 2 hits already taken off of its health bar? I don't think that makes as much sense because, well, there are a couple ways you could look at it. You could look at it as defeating the boss is an atomic thing. It's sort of all or nothing. You either succeeded at doing the whole boss fight or you didn't. And so it makes more sense to rewind the whole thing. Or you can just look at it in terms of a boss fight is supposed to be more of a high-stakes moment in the game compared to just, your primary gameplay loop middle of a level. So it makes sense to, oh, actually, there's a checkpoint over here I do want to get. A portal I want to activate. So it makes sense, then, to sort of up the ante a little bit and say, okay, now this is the end of the level, so this part you do have to do all in one go without getting hit.
See what I see? That right there is another module for us to use if you can get it. I wonder what this one's gonna be.
Sometimes by the time you get to the tanks, they're like this. I'm okay with this. I don't want to lie and say that it's intended behavior, but I think it's almost adorable how, derpy the tanks are, so... I think I'm gonna leave that just because... And they're very early enemies, too, right? The tanks are going to be introduced, I think, in the very first level, so... It's a matter of, wanting the first enemy the player faces to be... if not totally harmless, at least incredibly incompetent. I have to try so hard not to make a political joke there. Wow. So to give you some context as to... Oh, cutscene. I'm about to talk for a while, like my character's about to talk for a while after I hit the X button here. I'm playing with a PlayStation 4 controller, by the way. So I'm going to get this out of the way before then. So the way the rest of the stream's going to go, I am going to finish... I'm going to try to 100% complete this level, which is basically the demo. And then after that, I will open the floor to any and all questions you have. Honestly, I'm not going to turn you down if you ask me a question right now. But if you're looking for a particular time to do so, there will be plenty of time for questions later.
Looks like all the software installed correctly. Let me just make sure to make a backup copy. Okay. And then let's put the documentation. See what this thing actually does. Okay, the ballistics module allows your device to shoot projectiles.
Yeah, we know how to use the dang thing. This puzzle I added in because I wanted optional challenges, and then it turned out to actually be kind of crucial to the gameplay because it teaches you how to fight the boss. Go figure. Also, you can still toggle these tiles after they fall off the wall. That's kind of funny.
And I guess you'll figure out the rest.
Oh, we're in trouble. This is an older build than I thought because I think there's supposed to be more of those ion cells behind here. Yeah, and there were ones missing in the earlier room too. Yeah, so, I take back what I said about 100% completion in this because I don't remember what the correct ion cell count is supposed to be, so I'm not going to necessarily 100% it. I mean, there'll be no way to know for sure. It's not a nice even number. The final version of this level, so I guess this is a beta of the demo, if that makes sense. The final version of this level, it's a nice even 1200, and I think that's, you know, where I'm going to go with the other levels. Plan is to have it be sort of multiples, nice multiples like that. And that might, you know, that will change as you progress further through the game. I think later levels will have more of a a bonus for that, if that makes sense. I'm still going back and forth on what exactly I want the ion cells to do. I was initially planning on them having mostly cosmetic advantages to getting them, or not even, you know, but like very superficial things. One second. The cable my controller's plugged in with is a little bit sketchy, so my controller sometimes disconnects. Anyway, I think I'm thinking now, though, I definitely do want them to have a little bit more impact than that. So I think I am going to have some barriers at certain points in the game where, okay, now if you want to progress beyond this point, you need to have this many ion cells, something along those lines. Yeah. Might as well get these. Okay. That was a weird bounce. That was also slightly weird physics behavior. You know, now that I mentioned physics, I should mention I recently actually did some research, and among other things, well, first off, I did one second. First off, I did, there we go. I did add some code to Filtration recently that improves some of the collisions because it has the same issue that most physics, like most ball rolling games on mainstream physics engines tend to have. Which is that sometimes if you bounce right at the edge of a triangle, you get a weird result. Now the code I've put into the game doesn't completely fix that issue necessarily, but it should do a pretty great job of mitigating it. It's a fairly involved solution. But while I was doing, you know, the research to get that code working, I ended up discovering why wall hits are more effective in Marble Blast than in other Marble games, running on, you know, again, more mainstream physics engines. And it's because the way Marble Blast's physics handles the you know, your momentum after a bounce, it's very different. Like, it's a completely different formula from what the other, and you know, the other libraries have. And I assume that the way all of the other guys do it is the one that's, you know, more physically accurate. I could be wrong. Maybe, you know, Mark Fronmayer is onto something that, you know, physicists hate them. Learn this one programmer's weird trick to wall hits. I don't know, but yeah, it's very interesting to see the contrast there, and unfortunately, it's something sort of deep enough in the physics engine. I don't know if it would be reliably possible. Why am I getting such a bad frame rate all of a sudden? It's probably just because I'm streaming. I mean, I do have it on the highest graphical settings, and my video card is still a couple generations old. Thanks, NVIDIA, for not... Well, honestly, thanks, COVID, for such low supply levels that I thought I was going to have a better card by now, and as of yet, I still do not, which I am, you know, that's okay. I can be patient. But yeah, but it's deep enough in the physics that it would be hard to, you know, sort of come up with a patch for it for existing libraries if you want to program it. But it is definitely possible if anyone wants to do that. So. And for the record, I did ask Mark Fronmayer whether that was an intentional decision. Well, I tried to reach out to him through a colleague as far as whether that was an intentional decision to make the physics different from expected like that, or whether it's some sort of error in the calculations. I have not heard back. Whether that's because he's too busy with Marble It Up, I'll give him the benefit of the doubt and say that he is. So, because from what I've heard, there's a you know, that game is sort of constantly in development. So, but enough about that game. Let's talk about this game. He says, and then can't think of much. Okay, so I have now unlocked the boss. Do I want to fight the boss? Oh, sure, why not? Worst thing that happens is that I embarrass myself with my inability to solve lights off puzzles. Lights out? Lights in some direction. I forget what the preposition... I think it's lights out, but... Alright, this one is easy peasy. Fun fact, I think at least twice during development of this demo, I had to nerf the puzzles because the boss fight was too hard for what's supposed to be an early level in the game. And solving puzzles under time pressure is always a hard sell, I think, for people. Oh, what the heck? There's a... That wasn't the puzzle I thought it was. Pro tip, make sure you notice which lights are on and which lights are off before you start trying to solve the puzzle. Because I'm like, oh, obviously this is the right sequence of moves, and then it apparently wasn't. Though that actually teaches me something about how I can turn off one square at a time, so, more you know, I guess. Should it come to that? Alright, this is where this stuff gets hard. Alright, so can I execute this strategy that I just came up with? Yes, I can, ladies and gentlemen, and... Okay, little bit glitchy, boss music is still playing. This is an older build, so it's entirely possible that whatever we just saw has already been fixed. This boss fight definitely has given me some glitches before, though, so I am going to have to take a good look at it later on in the development cycle. I've sort of set this level aside for now that the demo's out, because, look, I could keep developing this level all I want. I'm going to have to respawn at a checkpoint, by the way. And the boss music's never gonna stop, is it? Well, who needs music? Just play with the music off. Right. So with that in mind, I see we've got 6 people watching now. That is good to see. I'm just going to quickly double check to see if anybody is saying anything on. Nope. Okay. Just double checking the Discord servers that I posted this stream link to see if anybody responded to the announcement. So at this point, those trees. Oh, I don't want to take too much credit because these trees are one of several things in this level that I got off of the Unity asset store. Um, for those, anyone who's unaware, Unity has a thing called the Unity asset store. Thank you so much, Nature 10. Are you Nature Freak? Is that who you are? I'm not. I'm not sure. But in any case, thank you because yes. Okay. Wonderful. I just wanted to double check because usernames. But yes, Unity has this place called the Unity Asset Store where you can purchase things to put in your game. I will also note that when I say purchase, a lot of them are also free, and this tree was one of those things. The fact that the light catches it so well, that is partly just the product of the way the lighting is set up, and I actually really like the way it turned out. So yeah, I definitely can't take credit for all of the graphics, but certainly the ensemble of putting it all together is something that I absolutely will take credit for, and I appreciate any compliments. Thank you. But yes, at this point I will field any and all questions related to filtration, or related to most things, honestly. I mean, I reserve the right to decline comment based on what the question is, obviously. But
Seen so many balls crushed since Barry Bonds was still playing.
if you don't know who Barry Bonds is, he is a very well-known baseball player. Will the marble look like this in the final version? This is the current sort of working draft, so the intent is that, yes, this is somewhat close to the final model, and I don't see anything about it that would currently need to be improved upon. There is one thing that will be a little bit different. If you look very closely at the marble, you see how you've got 2 little circles on it that are lit up, and one of them has the logo of what is the jumping power, and the other one has the logo of this shooting power called the ballistics module, where you can hold this button, and now we are shooting projectiles. There are going to be 12 powers in the final game, and they're going to be basically different, so the marble's going to get filled with those other sort of, they're sort of like patches. As far as I can tell, those drones kind of drift off and explode when shot. Is it more obvious when you get a hit in future versions? Right. So the intent was okay. I think the intent of your question is to point out that it is sometimes not obvious whether you've hit them or not. And that is, I would say, that's a good point. I may change that. I can't make any promises because I don't want to start opening up to-do lists in the middle of this stream. But I do appreciate that feedback, and I do agree with you. It is sometimes not obvious enough. I'm trying to figure out how I would make it more obvious, but in any case, wish the frame rate counter would update that fast in PQ. Honestly, there's probably a reason why it doesn't. And it's probably more just a matter of statistics than anything else, because you really only get an accurate frame rate count if you're sampling some chunk of time. So so I'd have to ask High Guy to be sure, but I suspect that PQ has frame rates that are variable enough to the point where the PQ developers felt it was a good idea to sample more of an amount of frame, more time. Maybe that's not the reason. I don't know. That's just speculation on my part. My controller disconnected. Oh yes, and the cable came straight out because the little micro USB clips are just not functioning. There we go. Okay, that was weird. But yeah. And it's a good thing you point out this whole the marble appearance and these things on it, NF, because I'm just now remembering. So in the final game, obviously in this demo, this isn't an option because it would be a little bit pointless because there are only two powers. Um, but but in the final game, you'll be able to switch which powers you have sort of equipped at the moment, so to speak. Rather similar in a way to how the item equipping works in the Legend of Zelda series. Well, except not Breath of the Wild, because Breath of the Wild did. Well, no, it is still kind of similar to Breath of the Wild now that I think about it. Even though they sort of changed the paradigm a bit. Anyway, reason I bring this up, I remember I had a plan where the little decals were going to light up like brighter depending on which ones you had equipped, and I think I've been forgetting about that, so thanks for reminding me. The game's looking really cool so far, both aesthetically and the actual gameplay part. Thank you. Yeah, and I'm obviously there's been tuning that's gone into the gameplay. By all means, I would like people to let me know what they think of it, because from what I've seen and heard, it is hard to get marble physics right. Not just in terms of like the actual physics simulation, but just in terms of what to set the parameters to. And I've heard a common complaint is that a lot of marble games feel floaty, or like it's not fast-paced enough gameplay. And these parameters that you're seeing right here are mostly based off of how the physics simulation works in Marble Blast. Now, again, it's never going to be a perfect match, in particular because of the whole collision being treated differently and how wall hits end up working. But I guess my point is, it's not so much that I want to absolutely match Marble Blast's gameplay. I'd actually like to distance myself a little bit from it, just insofar as I feel like there's sometimes a bit of a strange uncanny valley effect that veteran Marble Blast players get when they play, say, Vanny's web port. Because in the web port, you have, slightly different physics, but if you're very used to Marble Blast, it feels very different. And that can sort of throw you off. Now, I don't think that's going to be much of an issue in Filtration, given that they aren't the same levels. But yeah, long story short, my goal isn't to duplicate Marble Blast necessarily. My goal is to replicate Marble Blast's success at having fun and engaging gameplay. If that makes sense. I just rambled for a long time about gameplay. You said the sounds are also really nice. Yoshicraft said this. I think that is Yoshicraft, right? Which is really noticeable without the music. Most of these marble sounds are just recorded from... Yes, okay. Like, literally me rolling actual marbles and bouncing them off of various surfaces. It was hard to find good surfaces for that, honestly, because there's often a disconnect between, what you imagine a marble rolling on a surface sounding like and what it actually sounds like. So, there's that sort of Foley-ish, thing going on. As far as difficulty, because Yoshi asks, how difficult would you personally rate the game to be on a scale of MBG to PQ to MVP, or at least as much as you plan it to be? That's a good question. First off, hmm. First off, I might question your rating scale. I definitely believe you that MVP is the hardest of those three by far. I feel like PQ might be closer to MBG in difficulty than people give it credit for, but it's very hard to tell as somebody who's been playing MBG for, like, literally most of my lifetime. So, but in any case, so rather than use a scale like that, um, I think the way I would phrase it is simply to say I don't anticipate anything to be as hard as MVP. Um, okay, I can put it in terms of sort of level categories. Um, my goal is for the initial levels to be as easy as, I'd say, MBG late beginner, early intermediate. And the hardest levels should be closer to the level of somewhere between MVP, intermediate, and advanced, I would say. Now, whether it's going to turn out that way, I'm not sure because, like I said, it's very hard to know how hard something is. What I actually might want to do is just have a few people play the game and see how hard they think various things are. Oh, there are some ion cells in this room I haven't gotten yet. And include in that a sample of some people who are not very familiar with marble games. So, to get a sample of, okay, if you're not a fan of the marble game genre, are you going to buy this game and then immediately return it because you can't do any of the levels? Or will you be fine? Phloem mushrooms. That actually does really look like phloem now that you mention it. Are the shadows moving slightly? Yes, absolutely they are. It's interesting that you noticed that, NF. If you know what to look for, it's obvious. Like right here, you can see. Oh yeah. The official reason for that is, well, the sun's up there, the sun moves, and who knows what planet this is on. The sun's probably moving in some weird precession or whatnot. Okay, my apologies. I just realized I probably made myself look like an astronomical idiot. Obviously, shadows moving are not a product of the sun moving as much as the Earth rotating. That is to say, relative to the solar system, the sun is staying put. But you understand what I mean. If you want a bit more of an honest answer, I guess honest isn't the right word. If you want a bit more of a candid answer, a bit more of a frank sort of answer, I noticed a phenomenon while I was developing this level where there were some like slight artifacts in the shadows that would move around a little bit as you sort of move towards and away from them. So the motion of the intentional movement of the shadows is partly to mask that, so that the player doesn't see slight changes in the shadows and think, oh, the game is bugged. Hopefully they see slight changes in the shadows and think more along the lines of, oh, hey, the sun's moving. And you can see it's still not perfect. Like right here, this little edge here, that's light shining through a crack that I'm pretty sure doesn't exist in the geometry. It's just the shadow resolution not being kind enough. But, it's... The shadows, I think do look nice enough overall. And now, I'm sure if you're familiar with game development, you're about to tell me that the sensible thing to do would have been to bake the shadows. You're probably right. I cannot for the life of me figure out how to get shadows baking reliably in Unity. It seems that every version of Unity I've used has some weird issue where, like, oh, well, if your UV map isn't set up correctly, then, like, this entire wall is full of blotchy artifacts now, and there's nothing you can do. It's weird things like that.
I really don't know what to say at this point.
Yeah, I concur with that in terms of shadow baking. I really don't know what to say. Anyway, um, how long are the days based off of the movement of the shadows? Hard to say because it's not a complete circle around the planet or whatever entity this is. It moves it's like a circle in place, if that makes any amount of sense whatsoever. Um, as far as how long that cycle is, I honestly don't remember. I want to say it's like a minute or 2 minutes or something along those lines, but I don't remember what I set it to off the top of my head. Maybe we can do some math. No, I feel like the easiest way to figure it out would be to literally just wait for it to go all the way around. Um, there were some fun things I did while making this level that, fun little details. Like if we still had the music playing, um, those lanterns, the things bobbing up and down, the actual light is sort of an orb floating inside the lantern and it's bobbing up and down. They're not necessarily going to be perfectly in sync with the music, but they are at least at sort of the same rate as the music. So it's little things like that are fun to put into games. Um, Tom Scott, actually, he's a YouTuber, recently did a video about the opening sequence to a TV show he saw a long time ago, and how much effort was put into what should really be very small and inconsequential details. But it really just, like, in his mind, that is evidence that even if you don't think anybody will notice, there is sort of a point to doing that purely for the sake of the craft. Past MB and by extension Quaternion, what other inspirations did you have for this game? Well, first off, Quaternion definitely took inspiration from the Myst series in terms of its puzzles, and I think some of that does extend to Filtration. There's sort of a philosophy within the Myst series of having puzzles where it's not so much an artificial puzzle, although there are definitely plenty of those in Filtration, probably. But an emphasis towards having the puzzles sort of be just an extension of the world. And, it's not that, it's not always that somebody intentionally set up a puzzle somewhere to make it hard for you to get in. It's more just, here's a machine that people use, but you have no idea how it works, and figuring it out is the puzzle. But then beyond that, I obviously did mention Zelda, and I take plenty of inspiration from the Legend of Zelda series. Especially with the puzzles as well. Like this level, the garden, if you really look at it from a game design perspective, my intent was for it to be strikingly similar to how dungeons are structured in some of the Legend of Zelda games. Ocarina of Time, for instance, or Twilight Princess are good examples of that. So that sort of notion. So that's a big inspiration. I'm also taking inspiration here from the Spyro the Dragon trilogy of platformers from the late 90s and the year 2000. Recently got remastered a few years ago. That was a huge moment for Spyro fans, myself included. Really, Filtration, to me, is one of those games where sometimes I get an idea for a game and I'm like, ooh, this is a cool original idea, and I'm going to build a game around it. Filtration isn't based around any one cool original idea. Filtration is basically me taking all my favorite game mechanics from, like, my top 5 or so video games and dumping them into a bucket. Now, I don't want to just say that, because obviously not all game mechanics work well with each other, but taking the ones that make sense to be put together and putting those together and making in the end some sort of unified experience that doesn't have any central core idea that hasn't already been done, but is a combination of several ideas. And as far as your question about there seem to be 3 slots for modules on the bottom, yes, indeed, but there's definitely space for more on the marble, yes. I mentioned this earlier in the stream. But yes, the plan is to have 12 modules. 2 of those are there, and then 12, 10 more makes 12. I've planned what a few of those are going to be. One of them is actually implemented already. I'm not sure if I want to spoil what it is, although it's a fairly unassuming one. And indeed, you will only have 3 of them accessible at a time, and you have to switch. However, switching is very simple to do. Rather than being buried somewhere in this pause menu, you press on the keyboard. It's the numbers 1, 2, and 3 are what it's bound to by default. On the controller, it's the D-pad, and you press one of those keys or buttons, and then that brings up a quick menu where you use either the right thumbstick if you're using controller, or on keyboard and mouse you use the mouse to select which of the powers you want bound to, which of the modules you want bound to that control. And there is a distinction to be made as well between ones that go on the left and right and ones that go in the middle. The ones that go on the left and right, and this is sort of indicated, I try to indicate this on the UI with how you've got sort of 2 wires here versus 3 here. The modules on the left and right, you just use a trigger or a single key, etc., to trigger. There's 1 control for them, in other words, versus the ones in the center have 2. So, jumping only takes 1 control because it's the jump button, but you need 2 buttons for the gun, because you have one that sort of loads. I guess not loads the gun, but sort of pulls it up, and then the other one shoots while you're holding that one down. So there is that distinction to be made. Other questions? I think I've probably gotten more or less all of the ion cells by now. 1137 does sound familiar, although now that I think about it, I'm wondering, was it 1137 or 1138? Am I missing one? That'd be funny if I were. I have to shoot this to open it. That's... oh no, it's not quite. I was going to say that's a soft lock if you cheat the game and get into this room without the the gun, but no, I don't. I think you can just go back up the slide. Actually, it's slippery, but not so slippery that you can't go up it. What level themes am I going to explore? That's a very good question. Not all of it's decided. The intent eventually is for each level to have a similar title to, this level is called The Garden. And the intent is for every level to be just the something. The... I don't know, city, or the... gosh, I'm trying to think of an example. Anyway, now that I think about it, that's quite similar to The Witness, isn't it? But yeah, the whatever. And so you have, sort of that, that theme. As far as what the individual levels are going to be, I'm okay with revealing that the level I've been working on for the past couple of months, it's called The Mountain. It takes place on a very large mountain. When I say very large, it's certainly one of the largest levels for, a marble game project I have ever created. I don't think it's quite the largest. I think if you're looking at like sort of total bounding box size, that Islands of Kalas and Quaternion probably take the award from it. One of those two. Um, but obviously those levels are also a little bit spread out. Um, and the mountain's a bit spread out as well.
Realize that these things
Um,
cost money, right?
and and then I have some other plans, but nothing I want to reveal terribly much just yet. How often will you have to backtrack to previous levels to collect things using modules you couldn't get at the time? That is a very interesting question. Um, this is potentially still subject to change. My plan is that that doesn't happen very often, maybe like a couple of times. I am thinking about adding sort of optional side challenges in some levels that would have that, but I'm debating how much I want to, have them require things you couldn't get. Although I guess what I can do is just block off the path to that level with something that you obviously can't do until you have the module for it. So yeah, I would say that's definitely a possibility. That will happen to a mild extent. That being said, I think my philosophy for that is going to be that if you go through and do everything you can at every point, you won't have to backtrack. So, like, for instance, this forest level, as it stands, you can 100% complete the level as it stands in the demo with only the things that you can get in the demo. I'm not planning on, adding extra rooms to this level later that require other powers. And I'm not saying you'll be able to 100% every level. Let me backtrack a little bit, because it's a little bit, I think I'm obscuring what I'm trying to say here. What I'm trying to say is, I think my philosophy is that if you try to complete everything as soon as you can, then you won't have to backtrack. But there may be optional backtracking parts that are helpful if there's some optional challenge in a later level that you would like to get out of the way, but you're having trouble completing it because of its difficulty. That's the point where you can go back to earlier levels, and there'll be some optional challenge that you haven't done because at the time you didn't have the necessary power for it. Now you do. Now you can go back and do it. So again, I really made this a longer answer than it could have been. Long story short, my intent is that you will never have to backtrack to previous levels, but that those backtracking opportunities will be available for 100% completionists and for people who are having trouble completing things in later levels that would otherwise be mandatory, if that makes sense. Other questions? How much does the marble cost? Oh, haha. That's a very good question. So originally my thought was that this game took place in some crazy parallel universe. Well, then naturally I had to go and record a voice line about a baseball player, and therefore this is, I guess, technically, theoretically set in our universe, in some version of the future, I guess. So in terms of how much the marble costs, that being said, I think I can still get away with saying that the economy and culture of whatever time period and place this game is set in is probably so far removed from, you know, early 20s United States. Feels weird to say early 20s. Oh gosh. That that for all intents and purposes, for all intents and purposes, you know, it's there's not really a comparison to be made. What role? Couldn't you just remove that voice line and have it in another universe? Okay, that is true, but honestly, for this game, I'm answering your question first, just because it's more relevant to the previous discussion, and it's also shorter to answer. By the way,
Got some kind of phobia of spheres? Jeez.
for what it's worth, I don't think the world building is particularly important to this particular game's immersion, because of the fact that the concept is already somewhat outlandish, the art style is already somewhat cartoony, and point being, in the end, I think this is definitely more of a gameplay-driven game than a story-driven game. And I would say that it's at the point, the world building matters to me less than the opportunity to make a baseball joke. So, and that's just me being honest, you know, about my own personal interests. So, what role does the character I voice play in the game, and who or what controls the marble? So the concept behind this game. I don't have all the details of this necessarily fleshed out yet, and I will to an extent, just, you know, because you do still have to have a story for this game. But basically, you're using this marble is sort of a robot. In fact, in game, I try very hard not to call it a marble at any point. You can call it a ball, but you know, it is a robotic ball. Kind of like a rover sort of thing. Like, the point of it is to explore places and collect samples of things. Maybe not just samples, but, like, you know, to collect resources. You're mining, in a sense. Except instead of, you know, just mining in, like, some uninhabited area, you're going through this area that was inhabited, and is now both A, abandoned, and B, overrun by some sort of enemy robots. Now, why are the enemy robots there? You know, who orchestrated this, you know, robot coup that killed the people who lived here? Whatever it turns out to have, you know, happened. That's a very good question, and that's a question that might, you know, go, you know, unanswered for, you know, that's something I haven't fully made up my mind on yet. And so the idea is that the player character, you are somebody guiding this robot through these sort of ruins.
I really don't know what to say at this point.
You know, guiding the marble, or the robotic ball rover through the... I'll come up with, like, a technical name for it at some point. It's probably going to be, like, you know, Ballotron 3000. No, I'm not going to call it that. That sounds like something you would buy from a sketchy website, and only if you're over 18. Anyway, and then the sort of I don't know if I want to call him the narrator, but this is somebody who's communicating with you sort of over a voice channel to sort of help guide you through things. Just sort of like a generic mentor-ish figure. Where are the ion things stored in the ball? Unintended, but goodness. Apologies for the cough. Where are the ion things stored in the ball? That is a very good question, and that's something I think I have to just leave up to, up to the player's imagination. I guess, okay. Where are the ion things stored in the ball? The same place that Spyro keeps all of the gems he collects. So I guess that's my answer. Oh, by the way, one thing I do want to mention about this whole portal network. So you go into a portal and you can cycle through the portals in this level. Now, I'll obviously have to get feedback on this whenever people are, playtesting this game and whatnot, but the current plan is that's not going to be a list of portals for each level. That's going to be one network of portals that you're adding more portals from different levels to. Hence why this says the garden entryway and not just entryway, because we have to establish that this is a portal still in the garden. And that anyway, if you try to go to one that's not in the current level, first off, I think it'll just probably show an image preview rather than an animated one, and then if you spawn from it, it loads the level and then spawns you. So, yeah. You like the way the portals look? Thank you. Yeah, it's definitely, actually, you want to know what the inspiration for this is? What airport is it? I want to say it's Orlando. At the airport, there are these there's sort of shuttles that go between the terminals. And on sort of the end of the thing that the shuttle comes from, there are these neon circular neon lights. And then sort of they've got like a one-way mirror set up so that it looks like there are, several copies of the circle sort of fading into the distance, like here. And so that's the effect I was trying to replicate with these portals. It's obviously also inspired by the way the portals looked in Quaternion. This is obviously a bit of a different style from that, but yeah. I wasn't going to ask this at first, but are there any Marble Blast references in the game? That's a good question. Off the top of my head, I can't think of any currently in the game thus far. That being said, knowing myself, I am definitely going to wind up making some at some point somewhere in the game, I feel like. Obviously no promises, but I feel like that's just an inevitability. Yeah. It is interesting that the frame rates are so strange. Well, if there's a level called The Mountain, you can't not have a Black Diamond reference. I'm not sure if there would be a good way to fit that in with the mountain as it is as a level. Why is this doorway just open? That's a little bit strange. Oh, you know what? It probably opens when you get close to it, and then closes when you go through it, but if you run away from it, it just stays open. I mean, I guess there's nothing wrong with that. Also, I really like the sound the invisible floors make when you roll on them. I do too. Honestly, the sort of force field floors are one of my favorite things about this level. And they will, in some form, make a reappearance in at least one other level, by the way. So, do keep that in mind. Goodness, and I spent quite a bit of time working on the shader code for this as well. I somewhere in like my Discord message history or somewhere with some of the friends that I was sort of consulting while working on this. I have a sort of an image meme I made, which is I want to say it was the old Drake meme where he's like sort of shaking his head at the first thing and then like smiling at the second one, and it's like actually like programming the rest of the things that need to be finished for the level versus making the force field shader look cooler. so so did I put a little bit too much effort into this? I don't know, maybe, but it looks nice and it sounds nice. Other questions. Will it be more obvious where they are? Yeah, it definitely can cause confusion, and it definitely has to an extent. In particular, because right here, I know at least one person has gotten confused at this tube here, not realizing that it was there and being like, well, why can't I hit this switch? My hope was that, as you can see, there's sort of this effect fading in and out where you can see sort of a faint blue hexagonal grid. My hope was that that would be enough of an indication, but, I definitely do think I could do a little bit more than that. So, like, there is an effect where they distort the air behind them. So, one thing I might end up doing is making that more obvious. I haven't modified it as of yet, though. That's still a thing to be addressed, later on in development. I'm sure if nothing else, somebody will bring it up, like, later on when the game is getting close to release and I'm having people playtest and such. Goodness, I'm going to have to reserve, like, at least a month towards the end of the development cycle for people to just play the game, send me a list of, like, 300 things they think could be improved, and then I do all of that, and then they send me a list of 300 more things that they found while I was fixing the first 300.
You realize that these things cost money, right?
It's going to be a process, but it's a process that, it's... I think the important thing is just to put a limit on that process, because you don't want to be incrementally improving a game forever and then it never comes out. Will there be a level editor to some extent? That would be very hard to do for a game like Filtration. Now, I know I did this in Quaternion. But in Filtration, the issue is that I anticipate that every level officially in the game will have mechanics that are not in any other level. And therefore, to really have a full level editor, like to really be able to say, oh, you can edit the levels, there'd have to be some potential for, adding an extra code. That being said, or, I could just take all of the assets and mechanics that are already in the game, throw them in a bag, hand it off to the player and say, here's your bag of tricks, go make something cool with it, and I'm sure people would have some really creative ideas. But that takes a lot of effort to do, to actually have everything packaged into a form like that. So, So I don't currently have plans for a level editor. However, I will definitely revisit that depending on how well the game performs in sort of, the sales department. If lots of people are buying this game and like it, then absolutely
Are you trying to
at that
single-handedly
point I
take
will
our market
say,
or something?
it's worth the effort. Put some extra hours in, get a level editor up and running, have it so that people can make Steam Workshop content. I think that was an errant bounce when I just bounced there, by the way. That is the sort of thing that some of the new code I wrote should mitigate. Um, but yeah, because now to reiterate, if for those who aren't familiar, I am planning on putting this game on the Steam store, and that will be sort of the primary vector for. Maybe using the phrase vector for transmission in 2021 isn't the best idea. But but you understand what I mean, obviously. The main distribution platform, possibly the only distribution platform for the game when the full game is out. And so if I am going to make a level editor, I will absolutely want to have workshop integration because it's just a very convenient way for people to share things. Will there be a Wii port? I think I can pretty confidently say no to that one because the Wii almost certainly. That sound when the ball bonks against the tree trunk is satisfying. I'll do it again. Because there will almost certainly. This tree trunk doesn't have restitution. I have never noticed. Are all of the tree trunks like that? Anyway, I am fairly certain. Nope, this one's fine. It's just that one. Ha! I am fairly certain that the Wii distinctly does not have the graphical and computational fidelity required for this game. Notwithstanding even the fact that oh no, this one doesn't have. Weird. It's like half and half. Not even talking about, not even getting into the fact that.
Well, we might as well use these things to play marbles. They'd last about as long.
Not even, mentioning the fact that I'm pretty sure Unity, or at least the version I'm using, probably doesn't have Wii support. That's actually a good question. One moment. Yeah, it looks like on Wikipedia at least, the only Nintendo platforms it even mentions support for are the 3DS and the Switch. Um, now if you're asking will there be a Switch port, that's a much more interesting question. Um, I doubt it. The game would have to perform very well for me to consider it worth it to dedicate the time to porting it to the Switch because I have heard stories from, I think, secondhand through sort of mutual friends from the Marble It Up developers about how incredibly stringent the process is for getting a game released on Nintendo Switch. And if I were to do that, I don't think it would necessarily be something I'd want to be doing alone. And now we're talking about pulling other people's skills in to sort of help me get the game out on various platforms. And it just sounds like a lot of work, and at the moment, I suspect not many people would buy it on console. I could be wrong, but I don't think it would be worth the significant, um, the significant investment that it would be. Um, what is the symbol on the tiles supposed to be? It's very abstract. I think what I had in mind when I designed it was, so you've got this sort of wavy part here, and then you have lines sort of going into it. And it's as if the lines are like thrusting into. That is the wrong phrasing to use, but basically the idea was I wanted to capture the notion of something being put into another thing. That still sounds bad when I say it out loud. Long story short, it's an incredibly abstractified representation of the gun module, the ballistics module, but very abstract. How many ball puns are there in the game? I don't have any official tally, and I imagine that the tally will likely change significantly before release. I hope that's enough of an answer for you. Did I just skip a mushroom? I think I did. Wait, let me watch the replay. Yes, I did. Wow. That's funny. Turns out you can skip a mushroom. I have to say, I am in a pretty excited mood as regards this project at the moment. I did take a sort of a couple of weeks off. What with holidays and such happening. And whenever I take some sort of hiatus like that, the concern I always have is, will I come back afterwards with like no motivation to work on the project anymore? And it is clear to me that at least in this case, that absolutely did not happen. I came back feeling quite motivated and have gotten. I've surprised myself with how much I've been getting done on this project over the past several days. So yes. And that's obviously a good sign for the project as a whole. The new balls come out of the portal when you die, but you can't travel back to their origin. You can't travel back to their origin mostly because it would be sort of pointless within the scope of the game to be able to do so. The way I'm currently picturing it is that somewhere in some like other place or dimension or whatever, there's like they have access to one of these portals, and there's just like a ball factory, and then when you so when you die, they take another one off the assembly line and throw it into the portal, and then you choose which portal it comes out of on the other end. Are there any further questions? Because if not, now might be a good.
I haven't seen so many balls
Yeah,
crushed since
Barry Bonds, okay.
was still playing.
Now might be a good time to wrap up, otherwise... Oh! The Planck core that was here in this room disappeared from it. That is fascinating. Will Filtration get a race mode before PQ? You know, it's funny you bring that up. Well, okay. Really quickly. Flavored toaster. There was actually... Oh, great. I am now stuck here. One moment. There was actually a Planck core in this room when I started the demo, because it's not the actual version that got sort of shipped. It's a... I am apparently playing an older build of the demo. Oh, I know what build this is! This is the build that has FreeCam enabled so that I could take screenshots to put on my website. That's what it is. Okay, that makes more sense now. Anyway, will Filtration get a race mode before PQ? It's funny you bring that up because I was actually some time ago.
I really don't know what to say at this point.
Some time ago, I was actually working on a race mode for Quaternion, of all things. And I had multiplayer in Quaternion up and running beautifully. In my opinion, in my personal opinion, now that I feel like I'm bragging about myself, but in my personal opinion, I think it was smoother than the I keep thinking that's like a Planck core or something in the middle of the, but no, it's just the reflection of that button. Smoother than the multiplayer in PQ. And that's purely because PQ's multiplayer is based around Torque's existing networking code, whereas the multiplayer I was coding was just another layer on top of it. Like, I just said, no, I'm not using Torque's networking, and then pulled, like... Or wait... No, my apologies. Now that I think about it, I did still use some of Torque's networking, but only the most basic layer of it. I am absolutely not going to redo PQ's multiplayer. It is a very, very complicated system. More complicated than what I had going in Quaternion, because think about it. In Quaternion, you've got, like, what, 6 different, like, power-ups you have to deal with, whereas in... there are so many other aspects to PQ. Is there gonna be an underwater stage? So, I don't currently have plans for that. Reason being, I've already established in this level...
Well, it's a good thing we backed up the software.
...that the marble has an electrical... the ball, whatever, has an electrical failure... when it comes into contact with water. Now, that doesn't mean we can't have an underwater stage. There could be mineral oil. You know, an under-mineral oil stage. Flex tape module. That is also another option that I have considered, is having a module that acts as sort of a shield that gives you extra resistance. The problem with that is that I don't think it makes sense as a module for 2 reasons. One is modules should have, like, a control associated with them, and I don't want to have the player have to, like, constantly hold down a button whenever they're underwater so as not to die. The other issue being... I would like for every module to at least have some general use, and it's harder to say that for for like a module that's like, now you can go underwater. I just thought of the third reason why that wouldn't be a good idea, and actually it is a very important reason. Namely, in this level and in the mountain, actually, I'm counting on water being a death barrier. If suddenly you have the capability to explore underwater, in the levels that I've already built, that effectively translates to you can glitch out of bounds. And not even glitch out of, you can go out of bounds in like a sanctioned way. I guess that wouldn't even be out of bounds then necessarily, but you get the point. I would have to build extra parts of these levels that don't exist just to give you something to do underwater. She wanted to know what the game looks like on minimum settings. Quality level I currently have on custom. That is purely because I figured for the stream it was a good idea not to have motion blur. For the record, the way this quality system works, you set the overall quality level here, and that's like those are presets. And then you can go into adjust quality and adjust individual settings if you want. Anyway, here's what the game looks like on low. As you can see, my frame rate's much better. But, yeah, I mean, let's put it this way. Low, from a graphics perspective, the goal for that, for me, is let's make sure that the game is playable for everyone. Well, not everyone, but, everyone within the minimum system requirements, as many people as possible. And even on low, like, this is a fairly complicated shader that's still in the game. I don't know if I want to have, like, an alternate version where this is just, like, a texture or something. But anyway, having, like, I guess my point is, I don't care all that much about the game looking nice at low quality. I just care about it playing well on low quality. Because, on the one hand, it's a lot of effort to make something look nice on low quality as well as the other qualities. And you can see, we've got, like, weird stuff all over the place. Like, I move into a different room, or even other parts of... Wow, that was, like, 4 times as I was moving towards that wall that the lighting just suddenly changed. So that obviously doesn't look great. But, like, point is, it would take more effort than I'm willing to put in to make the game look good, even on the low quality, but I think it's worth having at least, just so that people can play the game who wouldn't have been able to otherwise. But obviously plan is to have both a required and a recommended, level of, system resources and whatnot, and the recommended will be whatever has the game actually run well on, like, probably high settings, at least.
That these things cost money, right?
Whatever has the game look actually decent, at least. Or relatively close to the artistic vision. Other questions? Goodness, I might have to put, like, an epilepsy warning on this game or something, because if you're playing this at, like, low quality, it's an experience. Can you pet the dog in Filtration? I don't currently have any plans to have a dog. You can pet tanks. Yeah, by which I'm sure you mean you can blow them up. But yeah. That's kind of fun and also really annoying. Uh, any further questions? Because if not, as I've said, this would be a good place to sort of leave it there. Whoops.
Are you trying to single-handedly tank our budget or something?
Or we can fall out of bounds. That works too. I'm going to set the quality level back. Much better. Oh, that's a little bit strange. The camera can just go into that door. Heh. Fun. Well, if there are no further questions, I guess let me just say a couple of closing remarks. Um, if anybody was here hoping for a release date or any sort of similar information,
Well, we might as well use these things to play marbles. They'd last about as long.
note to self: don't go, don't die during the final remarks. That is still a long way off. In terms of well, not just the release date, but knowing when it is still a long way off. Is part of what I am saying. Just because obviously there's still a ha.
I haven't seen so many balls crushed since Barry Bonds was still playing.
There's still a lot of work to be done on the game. And a lot of work. I mean, we're not even. And those lamps are going nuts. We were about to ask about tramp options, but I think that answers that. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't even be. I wouldn't even be confident saying that I'm 10% of the way done with making this game, honestly. And I obviously am planning to sort of keep the pace a little bit faster than it was earlier in development because I actually started work on this game like over a year ago. Um, but then, life got in the way, other stuff came up, etc. Well, now a few months ago I decided it was a good time to sort of come back to this and start working on it again. And my hope is to finish within like a couple of years, but that's an estimate, and that's also sort of a guess. And I really don't know ultimately how long this game will take to develop. So, hang tight. There is a development blog. If you go to filtrationgame.com, I will post a link to that in the Twitch chat right now. That website has sort of the information on it's got information about the game. I'll be updating this sort of as time goes on, adding, sort of fun things about development, etc., etc. And if it's been a while since I've posted there, be sure to remind me. One moment. Stream just went offline. I anticipated this being a possibility. One quick second. Okay, I believe I'm back now. Please, I believe I'm back now. Everybody can hear me. I can see myself, so I think we're good now. As I was saying, absolutely, check out that website. I'll be posting there. If I haven't posted there in a while, ping me on something, and I'll be like, oh yeah, that's right, I should probably post something there at some point so that people don't think that development has been halted. So, yes, I'll definitely be showing off a couple of small things on there as time goes on, and, yeah, and then, obviously release is a long way off, but I'll be looking forward to that when it does come around. So, if you haven't gotten a chance to try the demo yet, that is also available from filtrationgame.com. I probably should have downloaded the demo from there rather than trust that one of the copies I had on my machine was the correct one. So definitely go on there, download that, give it a try. Let me know if your computer's having trouble running it, because I would like to know around what the minimum requirements are in practice. And yes, apart from that, I will see everyone another time. And if you have any further questions, you know ways to contact me. I'm on the Marble Blast Discord. I'm on the Marble Blast forums. I don't check them all that often, honestly. So yes. And I will see everyone another time. Hope everybody has a good night. And if you're still here, that means that you're watching the VOD, which I have to remember to post on YouTube. Well, till next time.